Aloha! Welcome back to Chapter 2, History and Evolution of Social Welfare. Indeed, the practice of helping others can be traced back to ancient times. However, as we think of it today in our country, we can trace it back to the late 1800s. The United States of America is very influenced by the old English social service systems. So read on page 19 in Chapter 2 about the feudal system in England in the Middle Ages. Because there is an important term you need to know. It's called feudalism. Feudalism means the wealthy landowners sectioned off part of their land. This land was given to the poor, who was known as a serf, and the serf farmed the land. The products from the farm supported the wealthy landowner. There was no industry at this time, so everyone farmed and supported the lord of the manor. In exchange, they received their house and food. The serfs were legal property of the landlord. It was a harsh system, but it worked. The landlord, in theory, took care of the serfs when they were in need. All religions have a concept of social good. For example, the Judeo-Christians in Protestant churches, for example, take care of the poor. Islam requires 1/5 of their income to go to the poor. Please read about the Poor Laws of England on page 20, because they are the stepping stones for our system that we're familiar with today. The Elizabethan Poor Laws are really the foundation, not just stepping stones, but the foundation of our social services today. Moving on, charity organizations are considered the center of social services. The first charity organizations in our country were established in about 1877 in the state of New York, in the city of New York. At about the same time, a few years later actually, a woman named Jane Addams created the settlement houses in Chicago, Illinois. Her first program was called the Hull House Settlements, and you can read about it on page 28 in your textbook. After these turn of the century, there's a very important part of social services which developed in the 1930s. This is after and during the Great Depression. The Social Security Act was passed in 1935. This is a huge change in social services. Again, you can read more about it in your text. When the Social Security Act was passed, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president. He's famous for creating the programs called the New Deal and the Great Society. The time of the New Deal was a time of huge change and innovation in human services. Check it out on page 30 in your text. More recently, you will notice there have been huge improvements in how social services has addressed the needs of the African American culture and the LGBT communities. So, we don't have much more to talk about for this chapter, but we need to clear up one very important thing. There is a term in our country called welfare mothers. It is discussed very well on page 33 and 35 in your text. It does not exist. There is no such thing as a welfare mother. In my 30 years as a social worker in the state of Hawaii, I never dealt with one. I did on occasion deal with people who cheated welfare, but I never met a welfare mother. Please read more about that in your text on page 33 and 35. So we can say that social good has always been around since ancient times. It has evolved, let's say, during good times. It's easy to be generous with welfare funding. When times are tough, welfare funding is often curtailed. This is just a jump start for Chapter 2. Please read everything thoroughly in your book. Then go to your discussion tab in Laulima, look at the discussion question, and tell us what you think about it. Until we see you again for Chapter 3, which is about ethics and values, a really fun topic. Aloha.